All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank you all for joining us today and another edition of the See Tomorrow series from eTourism Summit. We're really thrilled about the conversations that we've been able to continue within the tourism industry and really helping the industry look forward to come out of what has been an extraordinarily challenging time. And we're extraordinarily thankful for the amazing partners and from destinations around the country and from organizations that are supporting them that have continued to step up and support the Tourism Summit. So we're thrilled about the live event September 20th through 22nd in Las Vegas, and the co-location with IPW is really creating some amazing synergies. I think pretty much everybody in the industry that can travel will be there. All sectors of the industry will be in Las Vegas in September, and it's going to be a great event. We've got an amazing agenda coming, and we're going to be able to recognize our eTourism Summit Excellence in Digital Tourism Marketing Awards, which are closing this week. Nominations are closing this week, as well as a new Emerging Tourism Stars, recognizing some of the folks that are really stepping up to be the next set of leaders in the tourism industry moving forward. And one of the favorite things about eTourism Summit every year has always been our bright and shiny new objects, and are bringing new companies to the forefront and introducing them to the amazing destination marketers. And it's really, really cool today that one of our original bright and shiny object presentations, when Mo presented Bandwango to the tourism industry, and as a crazy new idea, and one organization that has just thrived in the last year is Bandwango. And Emily, I want to thank you and Mo and the entire Bandwango team for your amazing support of eTourism Summit ever since you launched the eTourism Summit, and for your support today. So now I'd like to introduce Emily Harris, who's the Director of Marketing Operations for Bandwango, to take this great conversation forward. So Emily, thank you and Bandwango so much, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Will. That's such a nice introduction. We love to be part of the travel space. You know, you guys are some of our favorite, most innovative clients to work with. And today we are joined with two super innovative clients. So I'm excited to start today's conversation. I'm a big proponent of why size doesn't matter and why a lot of destinations can do really cool things with Bandwango. But today specifically, we're talking about a use case which I think intimidates a lot of people, which is paid passports. And so I brought two of our clients who have done this in really cool, innovative, unique ways to talk a little bit about their experience and to share with us kind of what led them down the path of using a paid passport for their events. So I'm going to let Andy introduce herself, and then we're going to talk to Kendra a little bit. But Andy, can you tell us a little bit about your role and the destinations that you support?
Sure. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Andy Day. I'm Executive Director of Visit Long Beach Peninsula. We're the destination organization serving Pacific County in the state of Washington. We're in the very southwest corner of the state. And even though we're a tiny county by population, we only have 22,000 residents. We are a premier overnight destination for Seattle and Portland, and we host about 1.5 overnight visitors a year in paid accommodations, not including day travel. So very small communities, very small area, but big on tourism. And I should also mention too, I serve on the board for the Washington Tourism Alliance, which is a state DMO, is just kind of getting started. We just recently got funding about a year ago, and then of course COVID and all that. So folks might not think of a state DMO as being small, but we are still very much in the starting building phases, and so we were able to use the platform as well.
Great, thanks. Glad to have you today. Kendra, do you want to tell us a little bit about your destination and your role?
Sure. So my name is Kendra. Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for having me. I am the event coordinator for Visit College Station. College Station is in Texas. We're south centrally located. And to kind of, I guess, maybe give a landmark or something that you might be able to recognize us by, we are the home of Aggie Land. So Texas A&M University is in our backyard. So that brings in a lot of traffic for us every year. We have obviously a lot of transient population with the students. They leave during the summer, but I would say we're a relatively larger city. We have about 200,000 people in population, and we're kind of centrally located. We like to say we're in the Texas Triangle because a lot of the major metroplexes are about within a 2.5-hour drive from us. So we have Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston's about an hour away, San Antonio, Austin, and we're also a really large sports community, specifically speaking towards tourism. We see a lot of sports tournaments, especially during the summer. And that's kind of what helped keep us afloat during COVID, because a lot of those events you could have outside. But we also see a lot of conventions and things of that sort throughout the year. So we're really excited about tourism picking back up. We have a ton of stuff going on this summer. And we also got to host a Bandwango Passported event this past May that was super successful. So I'm excited to speak about that soon.
Yeah, thank you guys for giving us an overview. It's always fun to talk to people in different places. I'm a Texan, so I'm excited always to be on the phone with someone else who says y'all. But with that said, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the challenges that kind of led you down this path. What made you in your destinations think that a paid passport for an event would be the right fit for you? And kind of what did those initial brainstorm sessions look like in your destinations? Kendra, do you want to start?
Sure. So our passport was for Dine Around Century Square. We Visit College Station did this in conjunction with Century Square, which is a newly developed entertainment district here in College Station. And essentially what I did was I just kind of thought it would be fun to have like a foodie related event, but also something that was still a little COVID friendly. So Century Square has a big green space and it's kind of laid out like a shopping center. So we knew that the event could primarily take place outside. And I believe that there was a DMO in Florida who kind of had the same dine around experience that we got the idea from. So the challenges that kind of we thought of when creating this event was, you know, we're still kind of in the midst of COVID right now. Not everyone's been vaccinated, but how do we bring people together to enjoy this atmosphere, get to enjoy these unique, eclectic varieties of food, but also how do we incorporate a nonprofit here in our city that's really helped people throughout this pandemic that deserves some extra support. So with our passport, we actually donated all of our proceeds back to a nonprofit, which was the Brazos Valley Food Bank. So it was kind of multifaceted, the ideas that came from it, and it worked out really well for us.
Cool. Andy, do you want to give us kind of an overview of how the conversation started in Long Beach to talk through what an event might look like there?
Right. So it's kind of interesting, and I see this happen in a lot of things. We were kind of already headed that direction. We knew that we were maybe a little over dependent, over reliant on our events, that we needed to kind of streamline them and bring more technology in. And make them less, operationally heavy and volunteer heavy, things like that. And like so many things, the pandemic just accelerated all of those needs. So we, for years, we had been talking about this, having workshops, looking for ways to make our events more effective, more impactful, make sure that they were, driving tourism, not being driven by tourism, things like that. And like I said, this just brought it all to the forefront in a hurry. And so we had the main event. We've used this for a few different applications now. The main case study, though, is our Razor Clam Festival. And this is an event, razor clam digging is a, timeless, classic Pacific Northwest tradition, multi-generational family experience, food gathering. And this is something we've been having here on the Long Beach Peninsula for, it went all the way through, it started in the early or late 1800s, I think. And so I brought, this is a postcard showing the vintage image. We have a giant frying pan, you know, for the clam fritter cook-off. Then that used to parade around the Pacific Northwest. And so, and then it's always been in conjunction with the kickoff of clam digging season as well. So we kind of had a double whammy in that clam digging was also closed in addition to the COVID restrictions, which so that we could no longer, you know, have these congregate activities. So we use this platform to change the format. And so instead of bringing everyone into one central building to pay their fee that entitled them to their, you know, 10 samples or 12 samples of chowder for the clam chowder taste off, we used the app and had them move around to the different brick and mortar restaurants. And that was really, you know, a way to disperse people, and so that we didn't have large gatherings. It saved a lot of overhead. We didn't have to rent the venue, set up, tear down, all those things. And it was surprising. We actually sold nearly as many passes, but the price point was a little higher. The profit margin was higher. So it actually worked really well.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting, you know, Andy, you brought up something which I think every DMO who operates events or, you know, plans events has to deal with, which is, you know, stakeholders may be wondering, is this event actually bringing people in, or are people already here and now they're going to this event? So I would be interested to hear from both of you, like, how have those communications happened in the past for you? Like, what have you said to, you know, steer stakeholders away from believing that, you know, your events are not causing that tourism? And maybe how did this passport change or shift that narrative for you guys to be able to really prove that your events are a successful, you know, tourism driver in your communities?
I can speak on that a little bit. So with our initiative this past year, because we're kind of a smaller destination in a way, we don't have a lot of huge attractions that really bring people in daily or constantly throughout the year. A lot of what we do with our events are typically backed up to something. So we use the terminology extend your stay a lot. So with this event, Dine Around Century Square, it was a high traffic weekend for us anyways. We had Texas A&M graduations going on from Thursday through Saturday. And then we had a collegiate NCAA track tournament happening that weekend as well. So we essentially knew people would already be here. But the way we market it is, you're already here, why not come to this event and extend your stay? So then we work directly with our local hoteliers to do room blocks, discounted room rates, just to get people, I guess, a little bit more of an incentive to stay here. So that's kind of the way we frame things as far as implementing tourism events right now, just because we're not like Houston, Dallas, Austin, where we have those large attractions that are constantly bringing people in. I wouldn't really say we're like a tourist destination. We are more of like a sports convention type destination. So that's kind of how we've had to frame and pivot when it comes to implementing these kinds of things.
Some other benefits, I guess, that we saw too, you mentioned, like, you know, how do we make that case? So the data, of course, is so valuable. And so we're able, you know, we get a full report of all the people that purchased the pass, and we know where they're from. And we, of course, have the opportunity to invite them to opt into our e-news, which is always very valuable. But that's really helpful to us as the destination organization when we're planning and evaluating our marketing, but also to the event coordinators themselves. It gives them a chance to see for themselves exactly where those folks are from, what the origins are. And and that's a little different in a pandemic year, probably, but we'll definitely be using that moving forward as well. It's a really great data set to have. Um, and then the other thing too was just, our board's been really great these last several years, has been working really intently on several sustainable tourism initiatives. And this kind of fit the bill for that, in that it was getting people into those existing brick and mortar businesses. Because, going back to business 101, a customer is always more likely to return to a business if they've been there before. And the other thing we saw too is that people went there for the passport. And so they went there for their tasting, but they would often go on in and sit down and dine or get other things as well. And it created a sense of familiarity. It got them moving around the community into the businesses in addition. So that was great. And then of course too, it's really got us thinking about, how we move forward from this. So it's just a really easy next step for us to convert this into a year-round product. And we're still talking. We're not sure if we're going to do that as a paid or just as a passport. But that's something that, of course, that's how you make it more sustainable, right? Is that it's not just 1 or 2 days a year, but more like Kendra's, where it's available anytime.
Right. Yeah, I think one thing that's really interesting for all of our clients is a lot of times they will start with like one idea, right? And then once they've proven it out, it becomes this area of like destination development for them, because they're able to have identified an area where maybe, there didn't exist a way for people to easily navigate all of these locations. And now they're able to realize like, okay, this passport is moving people from brick and mortar to brick and mortar. Let's create like a more sustainable model for this, so that year after year, season after season, people can have the same experience, whether that's paid or free. So now that we're talking about how your passports work, can you guys maybe just give us a little bit of insight into, people who haven't used a Van Wingo passport in the past? How did your free passports work in conjunction with the event? What was the consumer experience like?
So the way our passport worked, and just to give a little bit of background, it was set up similarly to Andy's, as far as people would purchase a ticket for $15. Those 10 and under would get their ticket for $8. And that ticket got you access to the digital passport that Van Wingo developed for us. And that passport included samplings from 15 different restaurant tenants that were located at Century Square. So these samples could be anything from one of their favorite menu items, a new menu item, maybe a favorite drink, or something of that sort. And so once people paid for their ticket, got their passport, they could download it. And then when they got to the event, they would go around to each participating restaurant. We gave them a map that kind of laid that out for them, so that they could kind of see the walkable area. They got a branded set of utensils that had the logo on it. And as they went around, they would just redeem that offering for each 15 different restaurants. And those restaurants had a PIN code that were specific to them. That way they could make sure they were actually going up to the sampling booth and not just clicking redeem, because we didn't want people to cheat. So if people redeemed all 15 offerings, they then got entered to win a raffle from us, which included a stay at a local hotel and a $50 gift card to a local restaurant. So it was, again, really multifaceted as far as how it worked. But from the consumer side, we try to make it as easy as possible. We listed out the restaurant, what they're offering, kind of detailed, what that sample is, and then added that map on there as well, so that way they could visualize it and see the space as they walked around. So again, we try to make it as easy as possible for the consumer, and Van Wingo is great at helping kind of flesh that out. And if we had multiple questions about how can we lay this out, or can we put a map here or something, and they were very receptive to all of our ideas and just kind of helping us lay the groundwork, because as I mentioned before, we had never done an event like this. So we were just trying to make sure that it ran as smoothly and seamlessly as possible.
Yeah, I would say on that too, that like it was taken up a lot better, and we received a lot more favorable feedback. We were surprised by how willingly people like got on board, and the sales were really well. One of the great things about this is how, you know, easy it is to share and promote and market digitally, of course. And so it makes it really facilitates enlisting your partners and your stakeholders, right? So you can just create a slide that share that out with all your partners, then they can all push it out through their channels and things like that. So, you know, as far as marketability, it's just awesome. And then of course, if the online sales is great, you don't have to handle money. It just makes life so much easier. And then on the restaurant side, you know, next time, I think we could have done a little better job preparing them. I think in hindsight, I would maybe have a video clip of, you know, how to use the pen, or maybe a laminated card, something like that, that they just don't even have to think about it. Just like, and then for consumers, there were still some folks that, you know, still wanted a hard copy alternative. Or what we found too is some people started with a hard copy and then kind of transitioned. So I think next time I would maybe station a couple people around to help show people. And I think that, you know, there are folks that were just kind of on the edge. They just needed a little help, someone that could ask a question, someone that could show them, and then they would come right around. And one thing I have to mention, I just major props and so much appreciation to Bandwango for working with our event coordinators, our volunteer event coordinators. And it's just like, I really appreciate that. We were had been severely cut. Our team at that time had been reduced from 6.5 to 2. And so we were really strapped, and for time and resources. And so our volunteers, our awesome, wonderful volunteers, like, you know, we're really stepped up and we're running stuff. And Bandwago was so great about working with them and supporting them.
Well, good. It's always nice to hear that we're well received by those teams, and I think that's one of the strengths of our team too. Is during, you know, this time where a lot of people have been limited staff, we've been able to work within, you know, those other event organizers or with merchants directly to kind of connect the dots in a way that maybe DMOs haven't had time to do. And I think that's like kind of segues into, you know, merchant participation is always tricky. You know, anybody who's hosted a restaurant month knows that sometimes restaurants are very difficult to get a hold of. So you guys both worked with your restaurant merchants directly. Can you tell us a little bit about just like how that went, how receptive they were to trying something new here? And, you know, I know Kendra too, you had some things that you knew that you wanted to do differently next time, just as it pertains to making it easy and user-friendly for like restaurants and consumers. So can you guys talk a little bit about like stakeholder reception in terms of, you know, your restaurant merchants?
Sure. So like I said, I work directly with Century Square on this, and they are the property managers of all of the restaurants located within their property. So I work directly with their chairperson that kind of handles all of the relationships there. So we actually sent out like some communications to all of the restaurants just to let them know, here's kind of what we're planning, here's the date. We invited them to a Zoom call, multiple Zoom calls, just because one thing with restaurateurs is some of them are not responsive at all. Some of them are really immersed in the restaurant and are hands-on deck all the time, and some are more behind the scenes. So I just wanted to make sure that we gave equal opportunity to all of them to hop on a Zoom call with us. We put together like a little PowerPoint presentation to kind of flush out everything, because most of these, if not all of them, had never done something like this before. And this was our first time doing something like this too, of such great caliber. So we wanted to make sure that we had everything fleshed out beforehand. So we really walked them through how Bandwango worked, how the passport worked, but also constantly reiterated that they weren't going to be doing any of this like coordination legwork. They were going to be doing more of the getting the food samples ready and making sure that they were prepared on the day of. So once we kind of got all those logistics and details figured out, they were more like, oh, okay, yeah, we can definitely do this. So from that point forward, we just, kind of had to remind them like, hey, Dine Around's coming up. This is how many tickets we've sold thus far. So from the passport aspect, we didn't really let them get too muddled in all of that. We wanted to keep it as seamless and smooth as possible for them. And myself and my partner at Century Square just kind of handled all of that legwork. So they, of course, really enjoyed the process because they, again, didn't really have to handle a lot of that coordination other than having their samples ready. But I will say, we didn't cut off ticket sales. We continued to sell tickets as the night went on. And between Friday and Saturday, our event was on Saturday, we sold over 400 tickets because we got so much traction just from PR and some local news stations sharing our event. So we had originally told our restaurants, be ready to serve about 400 people. We had sold up to about 300 or so tickets at that point. And by the end of the night, we found out we had sold 852 tickets. So of course, our restaurants were like, oh my gosh, like they were pulling stuff from the back, like making things on site. So really the only feedback we got from them that was not necessarily negative, but more so like, hey, here's what we learned was, can we shut off ticket sales earlier next time? Which we had already decided as we were standing there at the registration table, like we are definitely shutting off tickets. But otherwise, they had a blast. A lot of those that were handing out samples were like the chefs. And they don't often get to interact with people. They are more behind the scenes. So they loved getting to be in a forward-facing role, handing out those samples and getting to talk to people and interact with them. So overall, it was a very positive experience, other than us just learning that next time we will definitely cut off ticket sales beforehand. But it was a great problem to have, I guess. It's better to not to sell a lot versus, not have a successful event. So we were really excited about that.
Hey, Emily. So Kendra, I'm glad you mentioned that. And which reminded me too, that was such an advantage for us to have those pre-sold tickets. And I think next year, maybe we'll do like an incentivized early bird type sale. And then, but yeah, that was really helpful to let our partners know how many samples to prepare. And then I was going to say too, the other thing about this that's so cool is this is scalable. Whereas before our event was completely restricted by the size of our venue. So, this has room for growth, and that's really exciting as well.
Yeah. And I know we've gotten a few questions in the chat and Q&A. Just to repeat, I'm with Bandwango, the destination experience engine. We launch free and paid passports that are mobile web applications and not apps. So there's never anything for anyone to download. It doesn't take up storage space on your phone, and it creates a pretty easy consumer experience. Although, like Andy mentioned earlier, we've still got people who are technologically challenged, kind of feeling their way out. But we do our best to make sure that we bridge that gap and consumers have a great experience. So just to answer some of those questions that were coming through in the chat, but I do want to ask Andy and Kendra, because I know you both had different ways that you distributed like funds to merchants, and Kendra, yours was a fundraiser. Bandwango, for those of you who don't know, when we do a paid passport creation, what we do is financially model out for our clients how much it's going to cost for, like, restaurants to provide their wholesale rate or retail rate for these food offerings or for these food samples. And then occasionally what we'll do is build in a component where the DMO can actually take in revenue from those sales as an additional revenue stream. And in Kendra's case, they use those dollars to facilitate a fundraiser for their local food bank. So can you guys kind of talk through the revenue side of things, how you use those funds, and how the distribution happened for you guys in the case of your two different scenarios?
Sure. So, like Emily said, ours was solely a fundraiser, and we kind of did this first year because since I'm with Visit College Station, as I mentioned, but we are a government entity, so we're kind of unique in the fact that we don't have like a POS system. So sometimes taking in money is difficult for us in some scenarios. And again, every DMO is different, but this is just how ours is set up. And then with Century Square, they also don't have a POS system. So we were trying to kind of bridge the gap between both organizations, and we thought, versus having to get a check from Van Wango for multiple entities and trying to split that up, why not just donate it back? So we really didn't see any of that like revenue process, if you will. Van Wango handled all of that for us. They housed all of the money, and then when we were ready to donate it back to the food bank, we got all of their necessary documents, and Van Wango cut that check for us and sent it to the food bank, and that was that. It was extremely easy, not difficult at all. That was one of the questions, and something that we fleshed out at the very beginning as we were planning all this, just to make sure that it would work. But for future dine around events like this, I'm actually planning one for this upcoming Christmas season. We will probably work to split the funds amongst all of the parties involved, and that will just be some questions and concerns that we work out with Van Wango to make sure that those revenue processes are distributed equally and handled, but definitely not worried about that. But we actually ended up raising $12,754 for the food bank alone. So they saw all of that money, and it was just a great way to give back selflessly, especially in a year when we're all kind of struggling, and the food bank worked so hard to provide for people that were in need during the pandemic.
And so we did a similar thing too with the, so our events are by and large put on, coordinated, hosted by our merchant associations or our chambers. Like I said, this is a very small rural community. So these are all volunteer run organizations. And yeah, they just don't maybe have quite the operation systems in place. So it worked out really well. We run it all through our subscription and through our accounts, and then we just turn all the proceeds over to them. I think we kept maybe $100 or $200, a nominal fee. Our kind of thing was like, we just needed to break even on, and that was for like web content development and a few other things, just kind of staff time stuff, project management. But the platform itself is covered through a lodging tax grant, apart from the county and part from the city. So it's, when we feel like it's our job to make sure that it's available to our communities. And so another thing that we did, another kind of case study that we use this for, it's a different kind of project, but it's kind of a buy local campaign. And I'm sure many of you in your communities have your high schools, the student body, or it was our sports association does a local discount card that they sell as a fundraiser. And so we actually partnered with our school district as well, and did this buy local passport with local discounts and special offers. And it was the same sort of thing. And it was great because they were able to then digitally market and promote this passport, which, in the past, it was like an actual physical card that they had to go around and sell. And it was, so it was just, you know, one of those triple wins where it was a new technology for the community, and it was fundraiser for the school, and it was a platform that we had available that was going to serve both our local residents and our buy local and our visitors. And we did that early on in the heart of the pandemic when nobody was traveling. So that was a really great application for us as well.
Yeah. So, I think one of the interesting things for me is always talking to clients about what surprised them the most. So in a case similar to this, we had a really small destination who launched a paid beer pass around October 2020 to facilitate, getting people to breweries. And what really surprised her most was how many people went to basically all of the breweries during this event. And I think what's really interesting is that in each use case, we find something like new and surprising. Most of the time for our clients, it's like we're surprised by how many people just want a t-shirt and will do anything for a free t-shirt. But for you guys, what was the most surprising thing that kind of came out of using the Banwango platform to promote your events? What was surprising about either like the consumers, what they said about it, or maybe merchants, or just what you internally were surprised about in terms of the event?
I would say something that was really surprising to me, and it might not be surprising to anyone else. I typically checked the number of sales every day, and I got on one day and I saw that this one person had bought like 50 tickets for himself, and it was just one person. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is he going to do with all of these? And I actually met him at the event. He came up and asked me a question, and he had bought all of these passports for his clients. So I think he was probably like a broker or real estate agent or something. So that was kind of cool to see how he utilized this dine around event to say thank you to his clients, or just as a way to show gratitude in some form or fashion. But he then was able to disperse all 50 of those. So each person had their own passport. Because I was confused at first, like he bought 50 of these, how is each person going to be able to utilize these? But Banwango assured us, no, like you can have each of them correspond to a person's email. So that was really interesting to see how that whole process worked, and just how someone wanted to utilize our event and the passport as a way to build those client relationships and say thank you to their own clients. So I thought that was pretty neat.
We were really pleasantly surprised at how adaptive both the consumers and the stakeholders and the partners and participants were. Usually, especially in a small town, like big change is hard in a small town, but people, there's always a few exceptions, but by and large, and I would say 85% of the people were like, oh, this is awesome. And people love to have a project. They love to have a mission. And so we were, it was just great to see how many people just embraced it and like, okay, let's go to all of them. And it's still, one of those timeless things. You're right, Kendra, people still love a prize. And so it was, those were some of the things we were really happy to see.
Yeah, people love a prize. I think one of the questions I get asked all the time, particularly when it comes to prizes and like Banwango passes, is what's the most successful prize we could offer? What will people do anything for? And I always tell our clients, like, the prize is not the thing. The prize is the first incentive to get people excited about checking in, and then once that happens, in almost all of these cases, what becomes the real sticking point, or the thing that drives check-ins and redemptions, is that people feel a sense of like pride and ownership over their journey with this passport. People want to go to all of the locations and try all of the clam chowder and decide for themselves which one's best, or they have like a personal, goal that's associated with the passport. So I think it's interesting, and like one of the questions that I always get is, what can we offer that will drive the best results? And the answer is really anything that you offer will drive good results, because after a certain point, people really kind of take that journey on themselves, and it's kind of cool to see. So with that, and oh yeah, Andy, go ahead.
Well, I should have mentioned this before. So the way that we did that, because this was replacing our clam chowder taste off. So the way we structured it, I think there were, 15 or a dozen participants. Once you had checked in at 10 of them, you were emailed or messaged the ballot. And that's what people wanted. They wanted to vote. And so that was one of the ways that we incentivized it. And then, of course, everybody that voted was then entered to win a fabulous prize package. But that was kind of cool. Like, people were really working for that, and we're excited to get to vote. And it was also cool too, because people wanted to know the results. A lot of people asking about that. So.
Yeah. I think, the voting piece, one of the things that, development wise here at Van Wango we're working on is how can we make that more seamless in our passports, because right now people do send, the individual ballots that they've created, or, we send out a survey after the pass ends to all pass holders to see what they thought about it or where their favorite location was. So coming soonish is some kind of voting capability in our platform, and we're really excited about that, because it's something that we hear all the time. People want to be able to vote on their favorite places, particularly when it comes to passports and events like this. So yeah, that's a really good point, Andy. So one question I have is, what did event planning look like using the Van Wango technology? Because obviously planning an event is always a huge undertaking. How did that typical event planning timeline change when you guys kind of factored in the digital technology? What was it like on your end, and what was required of your teams to kind of pivot and make sure that the passport was part of your events?
So our event wasn't until May, but I actually met with my partner at Century Square in January after Christmas, and we kind of started brainstorming this event. And then from that conversation, we met with Van Wango and told them our ideas and our timeline. And Van Wango is really good at telling you, okay, we're going to need to start building this this month. We'll need the information from you by this month. So our event, like I said, wasn't until May, but the building phase was around March. So then we worked to get all of that necessary information from our tenants that were going to participate around late February. We just wanted, and for us, it might be a little different, but we just wanted to ensure that we had enough time to market this event and get it out there so people could buy those tickets ahead of time versus waiting until the day of, even though we did do walk-up tickets. But for next year, that's something that we'll definitely implement a little harder, is buying those tickets before the day of. But I would say, the planning process was expedited just a little bit, but it wasn't so much so that it was really fast and furious, or it wasn't like we were just waiting around. It essentially gave us plenty of time to get all that information together, get all of it compiled, so that way we could share it on our platforms and our social media and get those tickets launched. So from a planning perspective, it wasn't like a burden or anything like that. It just kind of sped things up for us a little bit.
And in terms of the planning and timelines, one of the things that really struck me, it was amazing that we got it pulled together and online as quickly as we did. We were kind of working around the different phases of COVID restrictions. So it was sort of hurry up and wait. It's like, we weren't sure if we were going to be able to do it. It was canceled, then it was on, and then, so it's very tenuous for months. But then we finally had, an opening, and I want to say, gosh, we brought it online in like maybe 45 days, which I don't recommend moving forward. But it was pretty amazing. And again, the credit here goes to those volunteer coordinators they just, you know, did an awesome job pulling it all together. And, you know, and I would say too, the bulk of it is, you know, on our side, you know, we just provide our style kit and some images, and, you know, we deal with that stuff every day. So that's not so hard. What really I think takes the majority of the time and effort is getting those partners together, and pinning them down. And especially this year too, and they're just so busy. And you really do have to, you know, get it very boiled down and concise, and put it in front of them. And they want to do it. They just are so strapped for time. So that was probably the key component. One thing that I was also really struck by is how many people purchased so early. You know, as soon as it was live, people were buying well in advance, which is awesome. So next year, you know, typically this is an April event. So next year, I imagine we'll try to have it live by, you know, February, so that we can have that long ramp up. And yeah,
Yeah. So you guys both talked about like promotion and when you saw the most amount of signups. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about like your marketing tactics to promote the event, promote the passport, how that maybe differed from what you traditionally do, or, you know, just what worked really well for you guys at promoting both the event and the passport for your initiatives?
So we did a little bit of everything. We did organic social media posting on Facebook and Instagram. Visit College Station did that, and so did Century Square. And then we had an event page that we were both hosts of, so we would post in there event updates and things of that sort. And I think about a month or two out from the event, we started putting money behind advertising. So Century Square handled the paid advertising for Instagram. We handled the paid advertising for Facebook. And then I will say that a lot of traction that we got was from like PR, both locally and regionally. Century Square has a phenomenal public relations team that sent out a ton of press releases for us. I had some radio spots that I spoke on. And then we have a very big like public figure here in Bryan College Station. He has a ton of following. He works for a local news station. So I reached out to him personally and just let him know about our event. He posted about it that Friday before, and between that Friday and Saturday was when we saw a ton of ticket sales. We like to call him an influencer, but he refuses to call himself that. But after that event, we're like, you're definitely an influencer. So we think we owe a lot of our success to Rusty Surratt, who works for KBTX here in Bryan College Station. But I would say it was just multifaceted. We used a lot of different marketing efforts, and it seemed to work really well for us. And we actually put together our own like website landing page. I know that Bandwango has done a like landing page for us in the past, but this year we kind of decided to take it ourselves and make it our own. And that was very, it got a lot of great traction. It was a little bit more interactive, and it branded both Century Square and Visit College Station very well. But Bandwango is also great at creating those website landing pages should you not want to do that yourself. So yeah, we had a little bit of everything.
and so as I mentioned, we were, you know, in a COVID phase still, and it's a bit of a tightrope act, right? We had to be very sensitive to the concerns of our own communities, and not everybody was ready, and so we wanted to make sure that we, you know, led with safety. So we were very we did a very minimal amount, just for various reasons. We you know, put it in our own consumer facing e-news, and of course our organic social channels, but we were honestly we were pretty low key about it. We didn't want to disrespect our communities, and but despite that, you know, sales were great, and we're really excited, you know, to see what we can do in the future. I can't wait to, you know, really throw some some marketing and promotion into it and see what we can do for it. I think, yeah, given more time and resources, and like I said, this is scalable. We're no longer limited to how many people we can fit into the Elks Lodge. So we can, this has so much potential. So we're excited about, moving forward when we're ready.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Kendra, I think to your point, like I used to work at a DMO and I was like very anti-influencer. I was like, they don't work and we spend a ton of money hosting them. And I just, it never goes the way that you think it will. But here at Banwango, one of the interesting things is that we see time and time again that local influencers drive a huge amount of traffic for these passes, whether they're paid or free. Like earned media is typically one of the highest, if not the highest converter of sales and signups. And so, yeah, it's an interesting thing. Like the world of influencers is always shifting, but getting to a point where we can really prove out success for that, I think is something that Banwango is great for.
Yeah, absolutely. And we never really thought about that before. And it was kind of like a last minute, oh, hey, I need to send this to him really quick. So from now on, I'll definitely be sending all of my events to him because he did help us tremendously for our dine around.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so I want to ask, I know we're running out of time here. I have just a few more questions for you guys, but are you planning to do these same promotions again? I know that Andy's talked a little bit about thinking this on a bigger scale, but Kendra, what does that look like in College Station? And are there next passports in the works?
Yes, so we actually have one that is kind of running indefinitely. It's called the Heart of Aggieland Visitors Pass. And it's similar to the pass that Andy was alluding to earlier. Like you do them with schools, typically they sell them kind of, but this one isn't really sold. We do only give it out to visitors coming to town for like sports tournaments and conventions. It's kind of like a VIP pass, if you will, but that one runs indefinitely. Local businesses and restaurants can submit an offering at any time to be available all year for a couple months, however long they choose. So that's one that we implemented and launched last month, I believe. And then before that, I implemented my first Banwango passport called the Holiday Deals Pass, which was in conjunction with Christmas and College Station. So that ran from November through December, and that one performed very well. So I'm already planning for that Holiday Deals Pass upcoming this November and December. And I'm also planning a dine around event at our other entertainment district in South College Station for Christmas. It will be similarly set up to the dine around Century Square, but we're also going to have the dine around Century Square again next year, to answer your question, Emily, just with a few tweaks. But now that I kind of already gone through one and know how it works, I'm excited to begin planning this other one, but also really enjoy those passes that kind of run themselves. The restaurants just submit their deals and visitors and locals can enjoy them for a few months or indefinitely. So there's really so many ways that you can implement a pass, but those are kind of our key ones that we have going right now and those that we're planning for.
So yeah, we have lots of exciting plans in the works for our platform. So in terms of events, I think the next one that we're working on, and we have a sand sculpture competition and exhibition coming up in the end of July, Sensations. And so again, we're looking at ways to disperse the traffic, not just for COVID safety, but also for to spread the benefits and the impact of tourism. And so we're going to have sand sculptures where they used to be all centralized in one location. So as a component of the event, there will be sand sculptures located throughout the peninsula. So we're going to create a check-in system where people can go and visit all of those sculptures and see those. And it may be spread out over time as well. We're still ironing down the details on that. So that's an exciting. And then we're going to have, they're all geotagged and there'll be a photo component as well. So we'll hopefully get some great user-generated content out of that. The other thing we did too is we kind of looked at our our three main marketing pillars. And we're like, okay, how can we create a free evergreen passport for each of those pillars? So the one that we are working on now is a self-guided birding tour of the county. So different places where people can go for birding. And then we will partner with our fall birding event for the content development. And then they will probably incorporate it into their program, maybe a workshop as well. So that's going to be our Wings Over Willapa event in September. So that's something we have in the works that we want to do this summer. I already mentioned we want to take that clam chowder tasting contest, and that will happen every year, of course, and we're going to build on that. And that'll just be the exciting next chapter for that, 100-year-old event. But we're also going to take, a spinoff on that and make it a year-round. This is we're calling it the Chowder Crawl. So countywide chowder crawl, because that's just something when people come here, they always ask when they come to the visitor. So where's the best clam chowder? We're like, well, it depends, So we think that'll be fun. We want to continue to partner with our school district to create that and develop that buy local campaign that is also a fundraiser. And then the other thing too, that's in the works, we want to make sure that we share it with our chambers and merchant associations. We kind of, like many DMOs, we have this very symbiotic relationship with our chambers and merchants. And so we try to focus on more of the out of area and management type things, with the chambers focus on the kind of in market, increasing engagement. And so we want to, make sure that it's available to them, that they can use to generate tours of their communities, or if they have events, if they want to do an art tour or whatever it is that they want to, bring forth and promote. So we're hoping, the plan is that within a couple of years, we can have a whole, portfolio of passports, some paid and some free.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you guys so much for sharing with us today. I think this has been a really cool conversation. To end it, I just want to ask, if you were talking to a smaller destination, what's your advice? What do you think, people who are in smaller destinations and are afraid to launch paid passports should know?
I would say that if there's any sliver of an idea or anything like that, and you're just not really sure where to start, just run with it. Banwango is great at helping you along and helping you flesh out those ideas. But really, in all actuality, College Station itself is not a huge town. We have so many bigger cities around us that we don't really even begin to compare. So sometimes it's easy to get caught up in those little details versus seeing the forest for the trees. How could I implement an event that Florida did, when Florida is huge and they have all this beautiful scenery and all these different restaurants and so on and so forth. But I think the biggest feat is just getting out there and implementing these events and doing these things for your community, because more often than not, I think people both in your community and tourists like to try new things, like to experience new things. So it's really just a matter of, having an idea, just running with it. And, if it's really successful, you can always implement it again. And then it kind of just becomes a staple for your community. And for example, we didn't really know how this Dine Around event was going to work out for us. And then we ended up donating almost $13,000 to the food bank. So it's just amazing what you can do, big or small. And Banwango is great at helping you, think of those ideas and figure out, how is it going to work best for you and what your goals are and how big or small your community is.
I would say too, don't feel like you have to create a whole new thing. I think of this as a tool or a vehicle for promoting what is already there or increasing engagement with what is already there. That's the thing. We don't have to, start from scratch and create this whole new thing. And then I'd say too, it's really important to look at, collaborating with partners. And seeing what the other needs in your community are. That can really take you know, the heavy lift out when you're working together with another organization or another community group to help come up with that product or to identify, you know, what that passport needs to be. So, and it's a really flexible product. You know, there's just so many things you can do with it. So I would say, you know, look at the product first. Look at what it is you need to accomplish, and then find a way to implement and utilize the passport.
Yeah. Great advice. Thank you again so much, both of you, for taking the time to chat with us today. All of our participants, thanks for joining and tuning in. I hope to see you all in September at eTourism Summit in Vegas. You know, meet me at the bar. I'll buy you a drink, and we can talk passports anytime. Thanks so much, Kendra and Andy, and the whole eTourism team for having us on today. You guys have a great day.